right. Just give me 1 second. Okay. I just like having the actual page. That's the thing. Okay, here we go. Sorry. All right, so the government basically submits, and just to give you like an update on really what's going on, it's about to go to jury in a few days. The government realizes that their case doesn't look too good, right? And just being honest, some of the things they didn't adequately prove. Now, I think there's two reasons why they did this move last night, and they filed this document to alert the judge that they will not be pursuing certain charges. And actually, it's within, Diddy still had the same amount of charges, but it's certain predicate offenses. That's the real accurate way to put this across. The reason why is that they didn't do a good job proving a few things. First of all, arson. Okay, Kid Cudi's car got blown up or firebombed. They never really proved that was Diddy. They just proved that it's reasonable to assume it was Diddy because he had an argument and a beef with Kid Cudi, but nothing that actually showed that it was Diddy. DNA found at the scene was a female. What else? There's a glove in there that they didn't really check. They just assumed after Kid Cudi said it was his. There's nothing that linked this to Diddy never. Kid Cudi gets up on the stand and says Diddy never told him that he firebombed the car. So there's nothing that really links Diddy to doing that crime. So when y'all have it as a predicate offense, where, remember, it takes two for a RICO, right? Y'all didn't even prove it. And they know they didn't prove it, right? Kid Cudi never said that Diddy admitted it. Nobody said that Diddy admitted it. There was further evidence that was at LAPD or something of the sort, or the fire investigator guy, and they said that got destroyed or basically tarnished, so the full investigation wasn't done properly. So it's like there's nothing that really made Diddy guilty of that specifically. So they're taking it out of the entire case. They're almost like saying, Diddy, you got this one, right? Also, kidnapping. There's kidnapping of two people they're taking out. Kidnapping of, number one, Capricorn Clark. Capricorn Clark told his story that Diddy had lost some jewelry, and Diddy didn't know who lost the jewelry or who stole it. Diddy has sent messages to the team saying, yo, whoever who stole it, if y'all return it, no smoke, no problems. Nobody does that. Nobody returns it. Nobody says anything. And Diddy takes his most trusted security guy and basically has that person bring them to a warehouse for days for some people and interrogates them, yo, trying to figure out who does it. Later on, he brings in a lie detector test to see who stole the jewelry. Now, the feds are claiming this was kidnapping. They're saying that these people were brought to this warehouse against their will, and they weren't allowed to leave until Diddy told them they could leave. That would be what kidnapping is. Also, Cassie. Cassie got her ass beat one time, and because she had injuries to her face, apparently Diddy had told the security guards, hey, bring her to the London hotel, make sure she doesn't leave because she has these injuries on her face, and we got to nurse her back to health because her face looks fucking crazy. Now, here's the reason why I think both of those charges they're not pursued anymore. I think they thought they were going to bring one of the security guards on the stand. The security guards who were there, who would be a co-conspirator, holding someone against their will at the direction of Diddy, that would prove kidnapping. But no, none of the security guards are talking. None of the security guards have said that they did A, B, C, or D. So at this point, it's like you're taking the word of the person. And then, of course, there just isn't enough to fully beyond a reasonable doubt prove that these people were actually kidnapped. right? Is there anybody at the hotel that would say Cassie couldn't leave? Do you know the name of the person who was doing the lie detector test that will assert or, attribute like, oh no, you couldn't leave? None of those things, right? So they're dropping those, and then they're dropping sex trafficking under the RICO. Now, so basically, like for example, Mia, right? Now, it's a little bit. I'm trying to explain this to you in the most. The jurors are going to be so fucking confused because I feel like I know a little bit more than the average beer, and I'm even confused. So the way they charged sex trafficking, they charged it under RICO. Then they charged it by itself for two people, Jane Doe, Cassie. The Jane Doe and Cassie sex trafficking charge still exists. So Diddy could be found guilty of sex trafficking on Cassie or Daphne Joy. But sex trafficking as a part of his criminal enterprise, that they're kind of giving up on that, which that's kind of interesting because they're now saying we give up on trying to prove that the enterprise knew that Diddy was sex trafficking and willingly did it for him, whether it was people who were responsible for payments, financial officers, or bodyguards or assistants. All the assistants testified, we just thought Diddy was doing some personal shit. We didn't know this is sex trafficking. So they're taking sex trafficking from the organizational level, and they're claiming that Diddy did it himself to two women, Cassie and Daphne Joy. So they're giving up on, like, they're kind of admitting that they didn't do a good job of proving this enterprise shit. They didn't do a good job of proving it. And I'm going to be honest with you. So this RICO charge is falling apart. The RICO charge is falling apart. Now they charged Diddy, and let me see if I could pull this up. They had charged Diddy with 7, right? They charged Diddy. Oh my God, which one? Oh fuck. Sorry, give me 1 second, chat. Give me 1 second. Is this? No, that's the sealed indictment. No, I gotta find the latest indictment. Let me find the latest indictment. Give me 1 second. Indictment. Superseding 2. Superseding. Okay. So there's 3 of them. Superseding indictment 3. Okay, so it's 2 times. Okay, got it. Sorry, chat. Yeah, just give me 1 second. Okay. All right, perfect. Okay, here we go. So this is the latest superseding indictment. So this was basically what brought Diddy to trial, right? This is superseding indictment 3, SS3. Oh, yeah, I can't see it. Oh, shit, my bad. Right here. This is superseding indictment 3, as you can see, says S3. And there was three indictments. There was the first indictment, that was the sealed one. That's when they arrested him. Then there was a superseding indictment 1. They added multiple more victims because there was only one victim at first. That was Cassie. Then they added Jane Doe. And then, they basically said there was 5 victims, but they only still charged in the superseding indictment 3 for Cassie and Daphne, but they put the other victims of sex trafficking under RICO. So they didn't get standalone charges, which usually means it's just a weaker, it's probably harder to prove that, right? So they're giving up on some of this stuff. Okay, what the fuck? No, I wanted the full. Oh my God, sorry. Superseding indictment. Is it this? Sorry, I don't have the right thing here. It's filed on redacted. No, it's 208. Okay, sorry. Trying to get y'all all the criminal. Again, we're gonna have to be reading some of this stuff, So just bear with me. Where the fuck is... Isn't it that? No. Where the hell is the superseding indictment? Superseding indictment. Redacted. Okay, it's 209. Okay. This shit is... Thank God for coffee, because it's like all this damn reading. All right, we got it. Sorry, chat. All right, here we go. Okay, so here's superseding indictment 3, all right? All right, bet. So, as I said, they start off with the enterprise shit. You got to do that before you this is the count 1, which is a RICO. And then they have victim, I think they say even victim 5, victims of So they said 3 female victims, but then they had other victims. You get what I'm saying? Now, remember, all of these were predicate offenses, right? So this was one of them here. I'm surprised they didn't dismiss also the guns as well. Because, like, did you really prove they had guns? Like, what the fuck? Like the feds, I ain't gonna lie. The feds didn't look too good in this one. All right, so let's see. Hold on, chat. Methods and means. Let's go look at the predicate acts. Predicate acts, where is he at? Let me keep scrolling down. Okay, here we go. So kidnapping, that was one of the first ones, right? That was their first predicate offense, and they're giving up on it, right? Arson, that was their second one. They're giving up on that. Bribery, I don't know if they're giving up on that one, but remember, they have tampering with witness and bribery, damn near almost the same thing. Then they had forced labor. I think they are giving up on that too. And then they have sex trafficking. They're giving up on that too. I'm going to be honest with you. This RICO case is like looking crazy now. So the ones that they're still keeping there, they're still keeping prostitution, which I'm not going to lie. I think they did a good job of proving prostitution, right? It was clear that, to me, being honest, it was clear that Diddy's paying for sex, right? And he was transporting people to pay for sex. You get what I'm saying? Which is prostitution. Then do I think they prove intent to distribute with this drug shit? Nah. I think Diddy was taking personal drugs. What else? Okay. And all right, cool. Yeah. So essentially for the things that they're dismissing, A, B, they're leaving C and D. So basically for him to get caught on this RICO or found guilty, he has to be found guilty of bribery. Do you think I don't think they proved bribery. I'm sorry. I don't think they did. I think there's a case for it, but I don't think without a doubt bribery was proved. Nah. Because also here's the thing. The reasonable doubt is going to be even with the $100,000, right? Paying for the video. Oh, I didn't know police were investigating it. I didn't know police were looking for the video, right? It's the same thing with tampering with the witness. I didn't know there was a grand jury. I just hit somebody up. I didn't know that you guys were looking for this shit, right? Let me see. So these still exist, but I think these are weak. Okay, forced labor. Right? I'm not buying this shit. Forced labor? Hell nah. I'm not buying this shit either. But I think this stays. Does it stay? Give me a second. Does it stay? Okay, sex trafficking, forced labor instruction. While the government has taken serious the consideration for the court's desire for brevity, the government still strongly believes that certain limited additional instruction on sex trafficking, forced labor, whatever that are necessary for the jury to adequately understand the law on these charges. Each of these instructions reflect established case law and are directly relevant to key issues in the case. Moreover, without such instructions, the government has serious concerns that the jury may misunderstand and apply the law for both charges. Okay. So they're saying they're requesting instructions that, wait, hold on. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I actually got to go grab something. I do. I got to grab something from the front door. All right, just watch Lauren Conlon for like 2 seconds. I'm grabbing something from the front door, right?
The government again just said, this is hearsay. Cassie never talked about this on the stand, whatever. I didn't quite understand the defense's argument about it going to the effect of, or the theory of coercion because she's refusing to go, but it doesn't matter because the judge sided with the government. That was not admitted. And what was the last one? Oh, there was something about a thread about Cassie decorating a hotel room for Diddy on Valentine's Day. And this was partially admitted. Some of the photos, the defense was trying to show that she did this on her own accord. Nobody asked her to. And the government, again, argued hearsay because Cassie never discussed this. They couldn't really match up. They couldn't match things up with her testimony and certain things on the chart, although this was mentioned on the chart. So they are going to allow some of the pictures in. I guess she took some pictures of a hotel room, but not some of the actual text messages. Okay, so again, I'm going to just go a little bit out of order, but basically Tenny Garagos, she had indicated yesterday that her cross-examination would most likely last about 90 minutes. Well, it ended up lasting a lot longer than 90 minutes. I believe it lasted close to over 3 hours. It was pretty intense and long, and she was really trying to get in those text messages from Jane, those really explicit text messages, really trying to show that Jane was a willing participant. I'll get into some of those after. But when she was finished and it was time for redirect, Maureen Comey was not messing around. Normally, Maureen Comey, her demeanor is just very contained, I guess. She got up there a little bit louder than normal, I would say, slightly more aggressive. Again, I think she was done. She had it with this long, drawn-out cross-examination, and she really wanted to have this mic drop moment, perhaps, to end the government's case, because this was their last witness, and they rested after this. So she gets up there, and she says, Special Agent Cerciello, we just looked at financial records for Sean Combs. Did they reflect that Sean Combs paid to transport Cabral Williams across state lines for objection? And then Maureen Comey reworded that in a similarly yet slightly less aggressive manner, which caused another objection and then a sidebar. After the sidebar, things cooled off a little bit, but I was like, wow, I had never seen Maureen Comey like that in the courtroom. And I guess if I'm going to offer some kind of opinion, my opinion would be that she knew what she was saying probably wouldn't fly on the record, but she really needed to get that across so the jury would hear it and they would sense the urgency in her tone and maybe the verbiage that she used, which kind of matched up to the indictment and the charges. So just going back really quickly to Tenny Garagos' cross, the poor jury saw 7 more explicit video clips.
All right. Thank you guys for understanding. All right. So let's get back to this really quickly. So we're trying to understand what the hell's happening. So it looks like the government is realizing they didn't do a good job of certain things, right? But they're also realizing they could possibly confuse the fuck out of the jury to the point that the jury just don't know what's happening. And it's probably going to hurt them to get a conviction if the jury got to come back out of the deliberation room, ask the judge what this means. So they need clear instructions, right? Clear instructions, right? Okay. So specifically, the government has removed instructions from the charge, right? From the charge relating to attempted kidnapping, both under both California and New York law, attempted arson, and aiding and abetting sex trafficking. The government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are not necessary. Okay? So they are. So let's go back to the indictment, which is important. We got to cross references against that. So it's the aiding and abetting. Oh, right here. So this is the aiding and abetting for sex trafficking, right? And this is one of the predicate acts. So they're no longer no longer going forward with trying to pursue these theories, as they're going to call it. They're also saying that arson, they're not really pursuing either. So they still are pursuing sex trafficking. So I got that wrong. They're still pursuing sex trafficking under, which is this. So that's F. The straight up sex trafficking under RICO, which I still think they did a bad job of proving, because it's, yeah, but you can't, other than KK, who I guess that's why they kept reading her text into evidence. They're saying KK facilitated this, right? They're saying the security guards facilitated this. They're saying that also kind of like the assistants facilitated it, even though none of the assistants claim that they knew what was going on. But that's what they're basically claiming, right? So let's keep reading this thing. The government has also attempted to simplify the language relating to count one. Count one is obviously the RICO case, the RICO charge. The proposal is explained in the government's comment, Bubbles, is that the government hopes to not only serve the purpose of streamlining the instructions, but also will avoid confusion as the operative agreement for count one. So sex trafficking and forced labor, right? So these are the things that they are pursuing, right? So they told us what they're taking out. This is what they are pursuing. So they're pursuing sex trafficking. And so while the government has taken seriously the court's desire for brevity, the government still strongly believes that certain limited additional instructions on sex trafficking and forced labor, instructions which are regularly given in sex trafficking and forced labor trials in the circuit, are necessary for the jury to adequately understand the law on these charges. Each of these instructions reflect established case law and direct relevant to key issues in the case. Moreover, without such instructions, the government has serious concerns that the jury may misunderstand the applicable law for both charges, which are extremely complex legal concepts about which jurors may have preconceived mistaken notions. The government has listed the precedent for these instructions in its comments, the forced labor and sex trafficking sections, and requests to charge. To avoid repeating the law and precedent here, the government limits the below largely to providing the government's reasons why, based on particular facts and issues at trial. Okay, so this is what they're saying. They're saying their instruction for sex trafficking is this: earlier consent, and this is what they want be written down as instructions for each charge that they have to think about. Each charge, it says earlier consent is not determinative, which means due to the particular facts of this case, the government believes that it's imperative that the court inform the jury that prior consensual sexual activity is not determinative of whether a victim was sex trafficked. As this court is well aware, the facts of this case involve instances of sex trafficking of Jane and Miss Ventura. Sorry. That which has instances of consensual sexual activity, a topic that's likely to be discussed extensively by both parties during closing arguments. So they're saying, listen, both Cassie and Daphne Joy at some point had consensual sex with Diddy, but that does not mean that they consented to every type of sex. And specifically, you're talking about freak-off sex, right? Okay. It's the Second Circuit law, Okay, cool. The same is true for forced labor. The government's forced labor theory focuses on 4 victims, Cassie and Jane, with regards to their participation in the freak-offs or hotel nights, Mia and Capricorn Clark with regard to their employment for the defendant. Similar to sex trafficking, Cassie and Jane's prior consensual sexual activities does not preclude a finding that later non-consensual sex acts are forced labor. Okay? All right, so they're trying to like put some earmarks in here to say, yo, not because someone consented or was down to work for someone means that they were down to do everything, right? Requested instruction 2. The payment was not determinative. The government respectfully requests that the court instruct the jury that sex trafficking and labor and payment to the victim for that conduct are not mutually exclusive. For sex trafficking, now you know this is about Jane, because Jane was receiving $10,000. So the jury might be confused. Well, you're not getting sex trafficked, you're a prostitute. You're a sex worker. So you're getting paid for your sex acts. You're not getting trafficked. You're just doing sex work. They're saying not because someone got payment, Jane Doe, means that she was not sex trafficked. As she testified around April 23rd, defendant Jane entered into a multi-year love contract under which the defendant agreed to pay her rent, $10,000 a month, while that contract was in effect. And in part, whatever the contract, the government alleges she was trafficked. Because jurors may be under the mistaken impression that someone can't be coerced if they receive compensation, the government requests that the jury be instructed as to the law that payment alone does not preclude finding of guilt towards sex trafficking. Okay? It says, because the forced labor victims also receive money or gifts from the defendant, it's also important to instruct the jury that payment does not preclude. Okay, so cool. Then the next request is that cumulative conduct. They're saying that the proposed additional charge language instructs the defendant, instructing the defendant that they may consider a defendant's cumulative conduct is particularly necessary for this case. For the jury trial, the government has introduced evidence not only of threats and harms directed at Ms. Ventura over multiple years by the defendant, but also the defendant threats and abuse of others, which Ms. Ventura was aware. Under the law, a jury may consider all of this conduct in assessing whether a victim was coerced. So they're saying, not because Cassie might have sent a text saying, yo, let's do a freak off tonight, means she wasn't coerced to do that freak off. You have to take into account that there's a pattern of conduct by Diddy. If she wanted to make sure she didn't get an ass whooping, she may have just done it. That's still coercion, right? Cool. All right. Requested instruction 4, physical restraint. Based on a cross-examination of Jane and Mia, the government respectfully requests the court briefly instruct the jury that physical restraints are not required to establish sex trafficking and forced labor. As this court is aware, one of the key witnesses of trafficking of Jane that the government intends to discuss at length in its closing, and which involves the defendant's assault and subsequent freak-off involving her in June 2024. During this cross-examination about the incident, the defense counsel extensively questioned Jane about the times she could have escaped. And I think that was Brian Steele who did that. He said, does the back gate have a capability for you to leave the house? Asking if she has other family members in Los Angeles. Moreover, today's Rule 29 motion, the defense counsels argued again that Jane could have not been trafficked on this date because she could have left. So they're saying that not because she wasn't physically restrained or prevented from leaving doesn't mean she wasn't trafficked. Okay. Requested instruction for 5. Okay, this is 5th instruction they want. The defendant need not receive something of value. The government respectfully requests that the court adds a single sentence to its charge on sex trafficking to clarify that the defendant need not be the person who receives a thing of value from a sex act. So they're saying not because Diddy was not fucking doesn't mean he wasn't receiving benefit from the sex act. Okay? Commercial sex act need not occur. they're saying that we need a short instruction reflecting back to the Black Law Letter proposition that a completed sex act is not required for a sex trafficking conviction. Without such a charge, a jury may incorrectly think that a commercial sex act must occur for a sex trafficking conviction. The phrase would be used to cause from the statute is not readily understandable for non-lawyers and may be misunderstood by jurors as requiring that a commercial sex act happen. Second, this law is relevant to the facts of this case. For example, Your Honor is aware, given one specific instance of the alleged sex trafficking, the government has focused on, during this case, its incident at the Intercontinental Hotel. The government has presented evidence that the defendant kicked and dragged her in the direction of the hotel room where an escort was standing by for a freak-off that had been already in progress. A juror could think that, even though a commercial sex act did not occur immediately after, because that was also what Diddy's lawyers argued. They said, even when Diddy beat her and dragged her back to the room, they never had sex afterwards. So this idea that Diddy would beat the women and then force them to have sex, supposedly only one time that happened with Jane Doe. She got her ass whipped in the shower. And that's when Diddy found out that she was going to allegedly Kanye West freak-offs, allegedly, yes. We don't know if it's yay. And she was talking to this fucking guy, and she linked him. She linked the sex worker outside of Diddy's thing, and Diddy was like, "How dare you go to another man's freak off?" And went through her phone and seen that they were communicating. Beat her ass in the thing, invited him over, and then watched him fuck her. Reckless disregard. Okay. With respect to more detailed reckless disregard instruction, we anticipate one of the key witnesses as to count 2 and 4 will be whether the defendant had requisite knowledge that Ms. Ventura and Jane felt forced into engaging into these things. While knowledge, a term people use for their everydays, is likely readily understandable, the government believes that additional explanation needed to explain the term of reckless disregard to the jury, a concept with which non-lawyers are unlikely to have ever encountered. Okay. So they basically talk about, they still have the same amount of counts. Count 2 and 4, proposed instruction, and 3 and 5. Okay. Anyway. I wanted to play what Logic was saying low key. Did you ever play that? Okay, check this out.
I wanted to tell you thank you. You're doing a heck of a job. That's a direct quote from Diddy to the judge when the judge addressed him during the course of allocution on today, day 29 of the Diddy trial, the final day for testimony in this trial. And I've got a lot to break down for you. I am Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I'm a New York attorney. Was practicing in this very courtroom. I've been coming here down to this courthouse to try to break down for you how effective a job the state is doing, how good a defense we're seeing from the Diddy team, how effective a job the judge is doing, and the vibe of the courtroom. And today we had our final day of testimony. The state rested. We got an allocution from the judge of Diddy asking him whether or not he intends to testify. As expected, he decided to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights to not testify, did not take the stand. And in fact, we saw no witnesses from the defense. In lieu thereof, they presented exhibits. This is it's stipulated together with the state that certain exhibits will come in. I'll get into the nature of those exhibits. To me, what was the most interesting thing that came out of today, we started the day with the cross-examination and then a brief redirect of the summary witness that was presented by the state as their final witness, and most of the testimony that was going on there was kind of bland and a little bit all over the place on direct, and similarly so on cross, where there would be just instances of conversations or exchanges that happen that there would be question about, did they say this, did they say that, which really lack much context. And it's difficult if you're not looking at the chart, which we in the viewing room are not privy to see, to really glean much from it. Perhaps it has some more impact on a jury who is able to see this, the nature of this evidence. To those of us who were sitting in the viewing room, it was far less impactful. To me, what was more interesting was the application for a directed verdict of acquittal that was brought by the defense as expected at the close of the state's case. Now, under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure, Rule 29, they have the right, and indeed it's likely malpractice if they do not exercise that right, to ask the judge to acquit Diddy of the charges that are brought against him on a basis that even looking at the evidence in a light most favorable to the state, that no reasonable jury could convict him for a charge or all of the charges as expected. They asked for all the charges. Why did I say that it's malpractice not to do it? Well, if you waive your Rule 29 application, that seriously jeopardizes your ability to appeal several issues down the road. So even though most of the time, the vast majority of the time, a Rule 29 application for a directed verdict is going to be denied by the judge, it is a necessary step for every defense counsel to invoke and bring up that application, which is an oral application, which we get to hear the arguments presented by the defense. The reason I find it so interesting is because it gives us a really good precursor as to where the defense is likely to go in their closing arguments and present their theory of the case. But in this stage, it's a free shot for the defense. If they lose on it, that doesn't hurt them at all. It's only a potential upside that they can hit a home run if they knock out one or more charges, because the judge agrees with them that no reasonable jury, even looking at the evidence in the light most favorable to the government, could convict him. And it's a free shot. Either the judge gives it to them or he denies it. As I said, 99.99% of the time it's denied, but it's a necessary step. And we got a really good glimpse into where the defense plans on going in their closing argument and what their theory of the case is. They spent a great deal of time attacking each charge. They attacked all 5 charges, and most of the time was spent on the RICO charges. And that's because if you look at the RICO charges, you need to establish that there's a criminal enterprise for the commission of various types of charges that are enumerated under the specific statutes. So first and foremost, they attack that there could not be a criminal enterprise here, that they describe an enterprise under the law as being like a wheel where you have your hub and your spokes and the rim, and people are sort of working in a particular facet to get, and they're all tied together by Diddy to try and effectuate a particular crime. So just in general, if you want to look at what the nature of the types of what criminal enterprises look like, each entity in that, from those different spokes there, they're supposed to know, this is my role here. For example, I'm the one who's cracking the safe, you're the one who's taking care of the guards, you're the one who's doing the getaway car. Everyone has their different roles here to try and facilitate, to work together in order to try and effectuate a crime, even if not everyone doesn't know the other roles of the others. They're still supposed to know what's happening here. And the allegation that was raised by the defense is that you cannot have a criminal enterprise when you have these different employees who don't realize they either don't realize they're facilitating a crime in many of the circumstances here, and that you don't have the typical hub and spokes and rim that you would see in a normal RICO charge. Now, excuse me for a moment. For them to try enterprise engaging in racketeering, where they went through the obstruction, trying to point out that at the time that things are happening here, no one thinks there's a federal indictment that might be coming along, so they don't realize that they could be obstructing something, and there's not an effort and a mens rea, an intent for them to try and obstruct. And similarly, with respect to the forced labor, they hit on the fact that each of the people who purportedly were forced to engage in forced labor, whether you're talking about Christina Clark or Mia or these different individuals, all of them were free to leave whenever they want. And just because they felt they had to work abusive hours or put up with Diddy being verbally abusive, or even physically abusive, they were all free to leave at any time. And if they're free to leave, you can't say it's forced labor. That's an employment dispute. And if you try saying that they weren't paid sufficiently because of lack of money or overtime, or all these other elements, these are your typical employment disputes which are handled under employment law that don't rise to a level of criminality and accordingly cannot help substantiate a RICO charge. With respect to sex trafficking, that they put aside and said we're going to come back to later. But I think it's interesting that they hit on the exact point that I was making, primarily about Jane, but they even brought it back about Cassie, and that relates to mens rea. Now, mens rea is a Latin term which refers to the intent. Even if the subject victim feels forced, even if they feel that they have no choice, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose the roof over my head. If I don't do this, I'm gonna lose my relationship, and I need this for one reason or another. Even if they felt completely forced, if the perpetrator, the defendant, has no reason to realize that they feel forced and is not trying to force them, it's not his objective to do that, he cannot be convicted of the crime. Mens rea is a necessary element is a necessary factor to each element of the crime. And since it's a necessary factor, they said the government has done nothing here to try and establish that Diddy knew that Jane, for example.
Yeah, so well, mens rea is it's not important in every charge, but it's important in conspiracy. So I'm only drinking because you got like it's not chest pain. It's like you feel like you need a burp. Pause. Mens rea. I spelled it wrong. Jesus Christ. Okay, so it's the intention or knowledge of wrongdoing that constitutes part of a crime. Now, here's the thing: if you kill someone, and I guess mens rea is part of most crimes because it does, like, you're still gonna get charged, right? So it's not like, oh, I didn't intend to kill him, or I didn't know I was doing it, or that's gonna be a difference in charge. Like premeditated murder, you planned it. Manslaughter, your actions resulted in murder, right? So, mens rea is more important for conspiracy, right? Because if your actions happens to end up in a criminal conspiracy, you're a part of the conspiracy as long as you know and you act on it, right? However, if you don't know, but somehow your actions help it, there isn't mens rea, which is necessary to convict you of those crimes. Okay? Just to give you the explanation.
One of the clips.
Wait. No. You ever feel like you had to burp? Like, oh my God, I don't get it. So that's why I'm drinking. This is Red Bull and liquor. I probably should just either drink Diet Coke or something like that. Never mind, man. Like, y'all seem like you're not human when I tell you that's regular shit.
Felt forced, that she felt compelled. In fact, they pointed out how we have one exhibit after another where all they're expressing is how much they're enjoying these sexual encounters, and accordingly you can't say, how is he supposed to know that they feel forced when all they're doing is telling him how much they love engaging these different encounters. Now, I have said that.
By the way, you know what I realized, and this is how much I think Diddy's defense team was playing this by ear. Remember I told you Diddy filed like an adjacent to the insanity plea? He basically filed this thing, see I'm burping, that he wanted to use this idea that he was drugged up. It's kind of like the idea where like, say somebody's accused of sexual assault, right? And they're like, well, Shorty accuses the dude of sexual assault. She says, yo, I was too drunk to consent. Sometimes the defense is also, well, they're too drunk to consent, and they're too drunk to be almost like it's both ways. So it's kind of like, it's like a 50-50. Y'all both got too drunk, and since both of y'all couldn't consent, we can't place the blame on either or of y'all, because we don't know if you initiated it, which that would make that other person unable to consent. And if they initiated it, you couldn't consent. So it almost becomes like this idea of like, just squid it out. Like we can't really do much with it, you know? But Diddy was trying to say, I was too drunk, or not too drunk. I was a drug addict and I was lit during all these things. But we didn't see him go down the realm of really painting himself out to be this, hey, all this, like, they kind of mention it, like, hey, was Diddy on drugs? Yes. Did he go to rehab? Yes, they do mention that. But they never really fully blew up that theory of, no, Diddy didn't know what the fuck was going on. Because that could be a defense for what Logic is saying. The defense of, yo, how could I know they weren't down with it? How could I know? I was drugged the fuck up. And all they would tell me is that they love it. But that's not what Diddy didn't go fully with that defense. You know, if anything, his defense was, man, stop it. These bitches knew what they were getting into, right?
That's something that I certainly can see working with respect to Jane. And in fact, with respect to Jane, I'll come back to Cassie in a moment. With respect to Jane, the defense further pointed out that, hey, the government in their initial indictment, and then they had a superseding indictment, it was only the third indictment when they heard about the purported physical violence that happened on June 18, 2024, which is something they only learned about a couple of months ago. Long after they started interviewing Jane, she never told them that she was about this night of violence that allegedly happened on June 18, 2024. And even if she told it over in a way that frankly seemed to me to be compelling, the reality is that without that one element, there's no incident of violence between Diddy and Jane. That is the only incident we heard, and they say even if you believe her, and the judge in this context is supposed to look at the evidence in light most favorable to the government, to the government. So since the judge has to look at it that way, he say, well, I have to look at it as if I believe them. But they're claiming that even if you have that one-off incident, that cannot be trafficking. There's not trafficking in one incident. And they were citing case law to try and establish that it's insufficient to prove as a matter of law. If it's insufficient, that would be a cause for the judge to say, I can't allow a jury to mull this over and potentially convict him on something that's legally insufficient. That's what.
Okay. And Chad, if you're